Tonight, a man convicted of manslaughter in the death of Barbara Kentner is back in prison.
That all of America knows of the intergenerational impacts of these policies and that we as a nation take steps to heal from them.
The U.S. Department of the Interior releases their final report on federal Indian boarding schools. And a vocal Indian residential school survivor and advocate has passed away. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Braden Bushby, the Thunder Bay man convicted of manslaughter in the death of Barbara Kentner, is back behind bars. He was originally sentenced to nearly 8 years in prison, but Bushby was granted day parole in August 2023, and that was continued again in January 2024. That day parole was revoked on July 23rd after breaching some of the conditions of his parole. Bushby was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020. In 2017, he threw a metal trailer hitch from a moving vehicle that hit the Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation woman in the abdomen. Kentner died of her injuries 5 months later. The Parole Board of Canada decision notes Bushby breached the condition not to consume alcohol when he was stopped by police and failed a breathalyzer in late April. He was also in the company of a female who was assessed not to be a positive peer. The Parole Board also questioned why Bushby got a tattoo of a Confederate flag on his chest while on day parole. You can find more on that story on our website, aptnnews.ca. Statistics Canada released the Crime Severity Index last week, and one community in Saskatchewan is pleased that their concerns have been addressed. In 2022, North Battleford had the highest Crime Severity Index score in Canada. The ranking led to the label the Crime Capital of Canada. And because the community is about 30% Indigenous, racist incidents would increase. However, in February, town officials told Stats Canada such labels harm communities. So the agency made a crucial change in their recent index. The 2023 CSI does not rank communities with populations between 10,000 and 100,000 people. North Battleford's website now offers information that challenges the idea that it is an unsafe community and to counter racist stereotypes. North Battleford Mayor David Gillian is thankful for the change.
People were pointing fingers. This must be your fault. And every year when these statistics come out and these ranking would come out and we were high on the ranking, it would really spike racism in our communities.
The U.S. Department of the Interior released its final report today explaining the trauma and pain the federal Indian boarding schools inflicted. The Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative report calls for a formal apology from the U.S. government and ongoing support to help Indigenous peoples recover from the intergenerational trauma the schools left. Between 1819 and through the 1970s, about 18,600 Indigenous students attended an estimated 417 U.S. Indian boarding schools. 1,025 is the number listed for other institutions like orphanages, asylums, and similar missions that took Indigenous children. The amount of students believed to have died while attending is 973. 74 marked or unmarked burial sites at schools were also identified. An estimated $23 billion by today's standards was spent by the U.S. on the schools. Authors of the report say these numbers could be much higher as more research is done. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland of the Laguna Pueblo said the U.S. government took deliberate and strategic actions through the schools to isolate Indigenous children from their families and deny them their cultural identities.
This trauma is not new to Indigenous people. One of the reasons I launched the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative was to ensure that this important story was told, that all of America knows of the intergenerational impacts of these policies, and that we as a nation take steps to heal from them.
The report also calls for all lands that once housed boarding schools to go back to Indigenous people, and a national memorial that honors the Native children should also be built. Following Holland's Road of Healing last year to listen to the boarding school survivors, Congress is now working on creating a Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding school policies to investigate federal schools, but also private and church-run schools. New investments today in projects designed to help improve fresh water quality throughout the Lake Winnipeg Basin.
Projects will support reducing nutrient pollution and enhancing collaboration and partnerships, and they will strengthen meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples in freshwater stewardship.
More than $2.3 million will go towards 17 projects under the Lake Winnipeg Basin program over the next 2 years. Among those benefiting are the University of Manitoba, which will receive $65,000 to improve and expand an online information portal and develop a way to share Indigenous knowledge. The Manitoba Association of Watersheds will use its $205,000 to support work in 4 watershed districts to help protect water quality and reduce nutrient loading.
Certainly the watershed districts talk about cleaning up the water before they get to the lake, and these kinds of projects not only help with flood mitigation and drought, but they also help immensely with nutrient reduction. And especially regarding our recent award.
Roots Talk Resources and Swan Lake First Nation are also receiving more than $106,000 to train Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth to become the next generation of land stewards. It's something they only heard stories and saw pictures of. But now a family displaced from Denendeh in the Northwest Territories is returning to their motherland for a big reunion. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings us this heartwarming story.
It's been a trip of a lifetime for Lauren Horton and Sue Sears. The pair, along with 12 other cousins from across Turtle Island, have traveled great distances to retrace their roots in Denendeh, Northwest Territories.
And we got off the plane and there was aunties and cousins.
Laura's grandmother was Georgina Blondin, Satugutne from Toledo, and her grandfather, Bill Boland, came from Wales and worked for the Hudson's Bay Company. Georgina fell ill from tuberculosis in 1932, but before she passed in Charles Campbell Indian Hospital in Edmonton, she asked her nurse, Sue Sears' grandmother, Ruth, to marry her husband and help raise 7 children. After that, Ruth and Bill had 3 kids together and moved to Ontario.
So we're members of Toledo, our band, and we're members of the Saturn Land Corporation, but without living on the land, touching, feeling, swimming in the Great Bear. You know.
The cousins have traveled over 3,000 kilometers across the territory to participate in traditional activities, making stops in Yellowknife, Hay River, Fort Resolution, Delaney, Fort Good Hope, Toledo, Norman Wells.
I hadn't ever seen the Dene laws before, and I was so moved. And the sharing.
They've met relatives like Ethel, Blonde, and Andrew.
And to also plan forward for the next generation, to not forget their ancestry and their homelands, and that I think that's really important. I find coming back is really going forward.
Wherever they go, they do ceremony and pay their respects to relatives who died in residential school, and lay tobacco down at Bill and Georgina's old trading post cabin on Great Bear Lake. But after nearly 2 weeks, it's time to go home. Cousins Wayne and Dave Anderson say their sense of self has been strengthened.
No sense of identity, you know, as people or anything. I'm Dene, I know that. I'm from Toledo, I know that. Ever been there? No.
To be able to put our cup in the water, in the lake, and drink that water is so powerful, because you can't do that. We don't know anywhere in Ontario you can do that.
The trip has been cathartic,
being able to do ceremony and shift the energy and the sense of grief, to shift that energy was incredibly moving for all of us in the family.
40 years, I tell you, it took to get enough nerve to come home, because the fear of not being remembered, the pain of not touching the land, the knowledge of why it was that the family was taken away in the first place, and it was residential school, our uncle passing, and then it was our grandmother getting tuberculosis that caused us to leave.
And for the family, it's the first of many trips to come. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Thanks for that, Charlotte. 8 First Nations, including 5 in Manitoba, are currently evacuated due to wildfires. We'll bring you the latest on the fire situation coming up after the break. Welcome back to the fire situation now, and an evacuation order continues for thousands in British Columbia as close to 350 wildfires continue to burn throughout the province. But cooler, wetter weather is helping in the fight.
Urging everyone to continue to report wildfires using the Wildfire app or by calling star 5555 from a cell phone. Even if you believe the wildfire has already been reported, please do not hesitate to contact us. The information you provide may be critical to BC Wildfire Service operations. We're also asking recreational boaters to please keep away from areas where wildfire aviation crews are operating.
More than 1,300 properties are under evacuation order, mostly in the central Kootenay region. Another 2,800 remain under an evacuation alert. Meanwhile, fire crews in Jasper are preparing for more hot and dry conditions later this week, as fire evacuees are still waiting for a timeline on when they can return. Cooler weather over the weekend allowed fire crews to regroup and extinguish all fires within the town. Officials with Parks Canada and the town say this was the largest fire Jasper National Park has ever seen. Many popular hotels and resorts have been impacted. The owner of the Takara Lodge says he's definitely going to rebuild.
I think what we can do is, as we look forward, we need to work very closely with the federal government, the provincial government, Parks Canada, the town, so we're all working together in unison and not at cross purposes. But we need to, bring in sustainable building practices, which didn't exist back in 1934, and exist today, and build this so that it's resistant to the next fire that might come through.
The federal government says more support is on the way, including temporary housing. But what and where that housing will be is still unclear. In Manitoba, there are currently 5 First Nations under evacuation. Last week, we previously told you the entire Marcel Colombe First Nation was evacuated due to being too close to wildfire. Now, as a precaution from the wildfire smoke, those with underlying conditions from Mantosippi, Wasagamak, God's Lake, and Red Sucker Lake have been brought to Winnipeg. The Canadian Red Cross provides disaster assistance to First Nations in Manitoba. Jason Small works with the Canadian Red Cross, and he joins us now. Jason, thanks for being with us. Can you tell us what the situation is like right now with the evacuation of people from 5 First Nations in Manitoba?
So the Canadian Red Cross is currently supporting the evacuation of those 5 communities you mentioned. Marcel Colombe First Nation, Wasagamak First Nation, God's Lake First Nation, Red Sucker Lake, and then the Sioux Nation, as well as Mantosippi Cree Nation. And that means for us that we are helping people who are get out of those communities. Often, a lot of it's by plane for some of those flying communities, but also helping people get settled in a new community for now, at a hotel with food and other personal items they may need. And most of those people right now are in hotels in Winnipeg.
Yeah, do you know how many people are in Winnipeg right now or in other places out of their homes, and what it's been like for them?
Right now, we have we don't have anybody from Mantosippi yet because they were just starting the evacuation today. But we have a little over 200 from Marcel Colombe First Nation. We have about 220 for God's Lake, 130 for Wasagamak, and around 170 for Red Sucker Lake. And right now, all of those people are staying in hotels in Winnipeg.
For people who have to flee their homes with short notice and little to bring with them, I guess, what type of help does the Red Cross provide?
We make sure they have a place to stay. Right now, we've got hotels set up for them. Make sure we've got 3 meals, as well as providing personal items. It might be hygiene kits, or it could be diapers and formula for babies, and just making sure that stuff is set up right now for them as they arrive.
For 4 of the First Nations, it's mainly precautionary measures for people with health concerns, things like that. Should others in the communities be concerned, though?
I think it's it's up to the leadership of the First Nation to decide who's going to leave, and they're keeping an eye on how severe the smoke is in their community. So they should be working with all community members. Obviously, are working with the community leadership to determine what's best for them. We're just here to help people when it's time for them to come out. And like you said, right now, it's mainly just those people with the highest health priorities who are coming out, and so they can get out of that smoke.
I guess, Jason, would you be prepared if everybody else were having to leave, that there'd be places for them here in the city?
We have people here in Winnipeg. We're looking at having people stay in Brandon. If we have concerns with hotel space, we will look at other communities and we'll look at other options. But right now, we have hotel space for folks here in Winnipeg and in Brandon.
Jason, you've been at this a long time. It's beginning to feel like an annual thing. Any idea how this compares with previous fire seasons so far?
Each fire season is different. This one's been a little later than others, but this is one we'll see what happens. It's been going now for the last week, and our team, which is a very experienced team, we've been doing this for a number of years now. They're ready to go for whatever's needed, and so we'll see how things go this year. But it's each year is a little different.
Just finally here, Jason, the Canadian Red Cross helps First Nations with disaster relief. Can you talk about that partnership?
Yeah, so we do this on behalf of Federal Government's Indigenous Services Canada, but we work very closely with the leadership of each community. It's very important for us that they lead this and we provide the support that they need. So right now we've been working very closely and very well with the leadership of all of the 5 First Nations that have been impacted at this point.
We'll leave it there, Jason, but thanks for the work that you do, and thanks for taking some time for us today.
Great. Thank you much.
A fierce advocate for residential school survivors has passed away. Details on that and more after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And this picture was taken by Sandra Seidel while on vacation in beautiful Campbell River on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Great looking view there. For your chance to be our photo of the day, send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 29 in Fredericton and in Halifax. Showers and 20 in Kuujjuaq. Rain in Nain and a high of 8. 25 with showers in Montreal. Rain and 27 for Val-d'Or. Showers and 28 in Sault Ste. Marie, North Bay, and Ottawa. 29 and rain in Thunder Bay and Sioux Lookout. In northern Manitoba, 27 for God's Lake, Norway House, and the Paw. Showers and 29 in Barons River, Gimli, and Winnipeg. Sun's out and 30 for Regina, Swift Current, and Saskatoon. 27 and sunny in Meadow Lake and La Ronge. In northern Alberta, showers and 23 for High Level and Fort Chipewyan. Rain and 28 in Edmonton, sunny and 30 in Lethbridge. Showers and 24 for Vancouver, 33 under the sun in Kamloops, 19 and rain for Prince George and Smithers. 16 in Old Crow, showers, and 15 in Whitehorse. 20 in Yellowknife, 17 with rain in Norman Wells. 6 in Sax Harbor, cloudy and 10 in Polituck. 17 in Chesterfield, 13 in Arviat. 5 in Resolute, 4 in Joe Haven. A spectacular light show should be visible across much of Canada and parts of the U.S. this week, starting tonight. According to one expert, the best place to view the northern lights is away from the bright city lights.
What we're predicting for tonight and tomorrow night is more measured than what we saw before. They aren't freaking out and telling everybody to get out, run north as quickly as possible to see this. But there's a very good chance we're going to see some good northern lights tonight. And so it's, a bad northern light is still a pretty great night.
Forecasters add that the areas with the least visibility, if you want to see the lights, are by the U.S.-Canada border. Well, an inspiring leader and beloved Indian residential school advocate has passed away. Garnet Anjikaneb was pivotal in the movement to secure compensation for Indian residential school survivors and the apology from the Government of Canada in 2008. Anjikaneb was from Laksewul First Nation in Northern Ontario. At the age of 7, he was forced by the Government of Canada to go to the Pelican Lake Indian Residential School. A statement from the Anishinaabe-Aski Nation said Anjikaneb, quote, showed us how to turn anger into a voice for justice. His legacy is a roadmap to guide us towards reconciliation. In 1985, he became the first Indigenous person to be elected councillor in the town of Sioux Lookout. Among his many accolades, Anjikaneb was invested into the Order of Canada in 2012. He passed away on July 25th at the age of 68. A big loss indeed. Condolences to Garnet's family. Well, that's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For news anytime or more on anything you've seen here, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for an encore presentation of Face to Face and our interview with longtime MMIWG advocate Sandra Delarond. That's next. I will see you back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for your first look at the day's news. Have a great night.